Good afternoon and welcome to Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority here on 103.5 WNHH. Anytime on video on the New Haven Independence YouTube page, or you can listen to us as a podcast through Apple or Spotify. I'm Kevin Watsy. I'm the host of Liquid Lunch. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Regional Water Authority, and I am a water nerd. And today we are going to totally nerd out on water. Today's show is all about research and development. And I bet you're sitting there saying, the RWA does research and development, and my answer to that is absolutely. And we're going to talk all about it today with my guest, Sherwin Gormley. He is a planning engineer with the RWA, and he also stands at the cutting edge of research and development in the water industry. Today we're going to spend some time talking about the absolutely cool and fascinating work he's doing at the RWA, but we're also going to spend some time talking about what he did before he came to the RWA, because it is equally as fascinating as cool. Before we get to that, we'll do what we always do, and we'll let our guests tell us their story. So, Sherwin, welcome to the show, and please tell us your story. How did you get to the RWA? What did you do before the RWA?
Well, I got to the RWA because my wife and I decided we were going to come up here to Connecticut and be close to our daughter while she was a librarian at a major college around here, and we left out of Cape Kennedy, Florida, come up here. Before I was here, I've been an engineer in water treatment for about 40 years at this point in time. I've spent I'd say I spent half of my career in one form of normal water treatment or another, and about the other half of it I've spent in human spaceflight water treatment related stuff. So that's been a big part of my life, has been, we'll say, extreme water treatment in an extreme environment.
Extreme water treatment. Where'd you go to college?
I actually got my PhD is from the University of Nevada, where they care a lot about water.
Absolutely, yeah.
So my undergraduate's and master's degree are from out in Fresno, California, and spent 4 years in the Air Force, and then I went to graduate school, and I spent about 10 years working with NASA.
NASA. So I was going to say, you dropped a few clues there, Port Canaveral and space. And so before you came to us, you worked for NASA, right?
I did at that.
And you, from what I know, you worked in environmental control and life support systems is the technical name.
That's everything to keep you alive inside of a bottle.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, tell us what that, I guess, area of NASA kind of did, and what your research specifically involved.
Well, my research was specifically involved with water treatment, and it was an interesting job because I spent 10 years directly working with Ames Research Center, which is out in Mountain View, California, near Stanford and Berkeley. And what we were involved with is actually kind of screening all the new water treatment technologies that are available for their applicability, and kind of the ability to actually move for NASA to move them forward and utilize them in our system. Obviously, our system was a closed ecological life support system, which means the water went in circles, a lot tighter than it does for anybody else in the world, and obviously we worked with the air people and the solid waste people, but effectively everything that you have to do to stay alive in space. And for us, it was about making, taking dirty water and making very, very clean water out of it and feeding it to people who knew the difference.
Right. So, yeah, to be clear, you were at the forefront of developing technologies to keep astronauts alive in space, because obviously we need water to live, right?
Yeah, that's
correct.
And
so you need your drinking water when you're up there, but you also need to do something with the
waste.
With the waste that you're. So you were working on different technologies to kind of to make sure that our astronauts were safe. Was this during the shuttle program or more space station?
What we were testing we truly were the leading edge technical screening for water treatment. What we developed were we basically screened and signed off on the space station water treatment system, which is the first system that takes water from the humidity condensate. It was basically air conditioning from the toilet, from everywhere in the process, and puts it through the system, and then it cleans it to absolutely true water, not even drinking water, but H2O.
Right.
We basically render it to H2O, and
Almost like distilled water.
Yeah, it's distilled
literally
water by
distilled
the time
water.
it comes out, and some of it actually gets split again to become all of the oxygen that people breathe. So not only does the drinking water come from, the water treatment process on space station, but your air does too.
So you're splitting the water molecule into its basic parts
H2O,
of hydrogen and oxygen, and making the oxygen that they need to live.
And if you want to get very chemically nerdy, the carbon that is in all of your food, it goes overboard with the hydrogen, because we have something called the Sabatier reactor, which actually takes the carbon dioxide and the split hydrogen from the water, and it puts methane, which is CH4, overboard, and gives you back clean air.
That is incredible.
So bottom line is the drinking water system is not just a drinking water system on a space station or a Mars transit vehicle. It's the air and water treatment process.
So and obviously you were there for a long time, so when the shuttle was going up, so they weren't bringing drinking water with them. That it was all, or were they?
Interestingly enough, this is something that was very interesting. The shuttle ran on fuel cell batteries. So basically they went up with hydrogen and oxygen tanks, and their batteries, their power generation was, they allowed the hydrogen and the oxygen to combine, and that generated power, and they wound up being a water truck. They actually dropped off a lot of water. Basically every time they burned it to power, and they dropped off water. When the shuttle stopped flying, suddenly they had a problem.
Right.
Because they had a whole lot less water coming up, just incidentally like that. And that was when the water recycle system on the space station became critical to long-term operations.
Right, because I guess the rockets that go up now, I don't think, I've never seen one, but they don't seem big enough to have enough room to bring thousands of gallons of water with them.
No, they don't bring much.
If you're not making it up there, you don't have it.
Well, and it's interesting that when you actually do the kind of what we call the mass balance, so how many pounds of air and water go into you on a given day, and how many pounds of air and water come out of you in a given day, it turns out that if you eat carbohydrate, I'll feed you sugar and water. That's what they gave him in But anyway, so if I feed you sugar and water, you burn the sugar to CO2 and water. So you actually make more water than you drink.
Oh.
So if you're actually in an enclosed habitat, and I feed you a high-calorie diet, you exercise and I feed you a high-calorie diet, you actually make water from the food. So that's
interesting.
So
the system you helped work on is currently on the space station, keeping those or some version of it.
I signed off on the system's certain components of the system at Marshall Space Flight Center before it was loaded on Discovery and headed for the station. And so I basically I was one of the final inspectors on it. But most of the work that I did was actually what we call the Mars Transit Vehicle baseline, which is all of the things that are going to the future.
Okay.
So right now, the SpaceX systems and the Blue Origin systems and these other systems, they're basically going over our work from the 2000s, and most likely most of the research I did will contribute to this next generation of space stations and vehicles.
So I want to ask about Mars, but so specifically about the space station, though, if that system goes down, I assume they have certain parts to repair it, or are they completely at the will of a rescue mission to repair it? And I guess how long could they go with that system being down?
Well, I mean, they can go for as long as the water tank that they have.
Okay. And so they have
there's a tank there that they have, and they try to keep it topped up, just like RWA. We got water tanks on the hills.
I was thinking it was more like one of those tankless water heaters where it makes exactly what you need when you need it.
No.
How big's the tank?
How big is it? Well, I don't actually. Now that I recall, I don't know. I mean, because it's one of those things where they've daisy chained so many bags and tanks and everything. If you've seen the inside, so it's a little hard to keep track of how much water they're keeping at any one given time. But I'm sure it's several hundred gallons.
Oh, okay.
You know,
interesting. So you talked about Mars and all that. The movie The Martian.
Yes.
You've seen it?
Yes, I have.
How, as somebody who knows more than the average person about Mars and space and all that, what kind of review would you give that movie?
It's actually the movie that Hollywood has produced in the last, I would say, 30 to 50 years that space scientists and life support like the most.
Really?
It's actually it's by far the best, the best. As far as that goes, they did actually pull some museum pieces from our work and use them as props, and it's a very good. It's actually it's intended on being as accurate as possible. Of course, there are things that they've taken beyond.
Of course.
So I mean, the toxicity of the soil was underrepresented.
Okay, so you couldn't. It wouldn't be that easy to grow potatoes.
You'd have to leach the soil out a little bit better before they actually got there. But beyond that, there's very little there that I could find fault with.
What's toxic about the soil on Mars?
It has what's called perchlorates in it.
Okay.
It has some pretty aggressive chemistry because I mean there's no life there at this point, and so therefore it has some really nasty oxidative chemistry that you wouldn't find on Earth, at least not in surface soil.
That's so interesting. And so, we will start talking about the RWA, but do you think in your lifetime or in the next, say, 50 years, are we going to have people on Mars, humans? So
I'm a heretic. I think that the most important things are what's going on here on Earth and in cislunar system. We will probably see people arrive on Mars in the next 20 years.
20, okay.
But I would say that that's probably going to wind up not being nearly as important as what we do closer to Earth in ways that benefit everybody on Earth on a day-to-day basis. And there's some things that are going down that direction that I actually find more interesting but get a lot less press.
Yeah, I remember hearing a while back that it's only a very small percentage of our ocean floor and like what goes on in the deep ocean that we actually know. We know more about what's going on Mars and Jupiter and Saturn than we do what's going on 30,000 feet below the ocean. And that always kind of fascinated me. Like, why?
Once you get below the phototrophic, the light zone in the ocean, there's a whole lot of ocean to explore. And there's a whole nother continent full of biology there to explore. It's a very interesting thing. But I mean, from the space perspective and the water perspective, it's also important to recognize that we have power, communication, resource issues, things. Yeah. There's a lot of things. I mean, you could possibly put all the, right now we have major water and cooling problems in the world around these large computer server farms.
Yes.
And there's some discussion of moving that off-world, literally putting it in orbit. Jeff Bezos is, put on the record of saying he'd like to see that be an industry that we take out of the picture on Earth.
So a data center in orbit.
Data centers.
Using similar technology to what you've done for cooling?
Yes.
Yeah, for folks who are listening, these data centers require enormous amounts of water to keep the systems cool because the computers generate a lot of heat and they use water to keep it cool. My old water company, we had a data farm built right next to one of our treatment plants, and they put in a pipe directly from the plant to the data farm.
Yeah, it's an incredible amount of water, and it's not a very good use of water. So, I mean, the bottom line is we need to solve the problems on Earth, and everything that we do in cislunar space or from here to the moon is going to be directed at, I always tell people you don't ever make $1 in orbit. You make $1 on Earth.
There you go. and that's a great transition to what we're going to talk about, how you're solving the problems on Earth. But I will tell you real quick, I did meet Buzz Aldrin once, and I knew I was going to meet him, and I didn't want to talk to him about space because I figure everybody asks him about the moon. So I did a little research, found out he had gone to West Point at the same time as my uncle, and my uncle was the quarterback of the football team. So that was going to be my in with Buzz. So when I met him, I said, Buzz, my uncle went to West Point the same time as you. Oh, and he genuinely seemed interested. Oh, what's his name? So I told him his name, and he said, oh, he was the quarterback, wasn't he? I said, yeah, he was. Oh, he was a great guy. I knew Steve well and all that. And he seemed like genuinely happy to not be asked a question about space. And then I said, can I get a picture? And he leans in and he says, son, if they see me taking a picture with you, it's all I'm going to be doing all night. And plus, I see your friend taking pictures of us over there. That's good enough.
Yes.
And that was my Buzz Aldrin experience.
Exactly. It's like, the answer is no. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But I do have some pictures of me talking to Buzz. So
that's good. That's good.
But, let's transition to the work you're doing here at the RWA, because you are at the forefront of trying to solve the problems here on Earth. I want to start with something that ties back to a show that we did probably 6 months ago. I had Aish from Climate Haven on to announce the kickoff of the Water Innovation Hub. So since we kicked that off, I know you've been very involved with that group, and so I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit about what the Innovation Hub's been doing, what the RWA has been doing with the Innovation Hub. What kind of things have we been looking to work with them on?
Yeah, well, their purpose in life is basically to bring startups into the world that are relevant to climate change issues, water issues. We went ahead and put forth a fairly substantial award. They went ahead and worked to. Eventually, we got 20 different proposals from different startups. Number of different proposals. I am not free to actually say which proposal is won yet until next week.
Oh, okay.
We're coming up shortly.
Okay.
But yes, we have awarded a substantial amount of money, $30,000 to do a pilot with a significant new technology that leverages our capabilities and provides, one of the basic things is it has to provide a value to the customers, to the city of New Haven, to the people,
right,
that basically pays back the value of its worth, but it allows us to move forward and bring new technologies into the forefront. And those technologies really are about, can we get water to people in the community less expensively, but also can we follow trends that are causing us problems? Like, as we warm up and get wetter, we actually don't have a water shortage in New Haven, but we do have a shortage of modern infrastructure. In other words, we have an aging infrastructure, and we need to bring that infrastructure up to speed, and we need to adapt it to the changes that we see in our environment.
Yeah, so on my last show we had Steve Vitko on in our environmental planning. We kind of talked about climate change where, it's not like we're getting more or less water, we're just getting it differently. So, you're still getting your 10 inches a month, but you're getting it all in one rainfall. Yes. And the infrastructure can't handle 10 inches in 3 hours. It can handle 10 inches over 30 days. And so when you talk about Climate Haven, so we got 20 proposals, and one of them is going to pick.
We picked one, but to be honest with you, we were so enthusiastic about two of them that we're doing two different pilots going forward.
Oh, great!
And one of them will be paid for out of that, and it turns out the other one will be paid for out of the engineering budget because it's mature enough to provide value to us right now.
That's awesome. And so on a project like those two, what's the timeline, right? So we pick them, you said, in a week or so, and then is it a year of kind of R&D on that?
Theoretically here,
yeah, theoretically.
Shall we say that
it's all theoretical.
If we have a warmer, we'll say West River water system, so we're going to have more algae. So that algae if we're doing something associated with, whether there's, controlling algae and the contamination associated with algae and the effects it could have on the treatment plant out for that entire section of our system. Well, we can only do that research in the summertime.
Right.
Because in the wintertime, we don't care.
That's right. There's no algae in the winter. It's not that we don't care. It's that there's no algae in the wintertime.
It's like, we don't, it's like we're not caring about algae at that point.
We have other problems.
We have other problems, though. I mean, obviously, winter water coming from an ice-bound lake it's going to have less of a problem than what's going to happen in the summertime when we have algae and we have a good deal of runoff going in.
Yeah, and so for those listeners, we talk about algae, and you may be wondering kind of what's the problem with algae. So the biggest issue with algae that our customers will notice is a slight taste and odor issue out of your faucet, because once you have algae, it's very, very difficult for us at the water company to remove those taste and odor issues. So if we can stop the algae from ever forming or getting into the treatment process, it helps those taste and odor issues. And there's also a problem, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if the algae actually gets into the pipe and into the treatment process, it kind of gums it up too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the issue with algae is, oftentimes people hear about toxic algae. We don't really have a toxic algae problem. What we have is a taste and odor algae problem. And one of the aspects of that is different. Every watershed has different minerals in it. For us, manganese. It's not a metal that's going to be harmful to you, but it may darken your water. It may give your water flavor. Algae has a tendency to carry that into our treatment plant and carry that into our process. So we're actually trying to develop systems. I call it a smart watershed. And we're trying to figure out how we can get better instrumentation in real time. And traditionally, you could just study algae, but you got your results 3 months later. That doesn't really help you if you want.
When you're getting customer complaints all day. Yeah.
So we would like to be able to, and oftentimes it isn't even that you're picking from a different reservoir, but maybe you're picking from a different level in the reservoir. You got to be able to test your water at different levels in the reservoir so that you can select clean, clear water that's not impacted by the algae or anything that the algae is carrying into your system. And that's for two reasons. One is, like you say, we can filter it, but there's still some taste and odor that will come through if that comes down the, if we can't really select for better water.
Yeah.
So we
harmless to the end user, but it's still there.
Yeah. We want to select prior to it going into the plant so that we don't have problems that we might have trouble coming out. It's also simply that we don't want to produce a lot of sludge. We don't want to produce a lot of waste from our process, because any amount of contamination of algae or dirt or anything, that we have to remove that from. Once we've removed that from the water, that becomes a waste product, and we would like to produce as little waste product as possible too. We want to be a sustainable process. We don't want to contribute to the problems in the environment. We want to solve them.
And that brings up my next point, because I guess some of the acceptable ways to take care of algae right now could cause other problems, right? So I remember my old water company, I think we used, I want to say copper sulfate.
Yes.
And sure, that gets rid of the algae, but it also it helps get rid of the algae.
Yes.
I remember the boats just going out and with a feeder system in the reservoir, feeding the copper sulfate, but then it could cause some other problems.
Right. And we've never had to do any of that at RWA.
Yeah.
And we don't want to head down that road. But on top of that, we'd like to be able to kind of lead forward in ways that are more inventive so that we don't actually grow that. It's like organic farming or something. You kind of want to, you'd much rather not only do we not use pesticides, but we don't want to learn how to use pesticides. We want to learn how to operate so that you don't need to use that type of chemistry to kill the algae, because then like as you point out, we would then have the chemistry in our product, and we just don't want to do that at all. We like the water quality we have. And we want to make sure that we can use a gentle solution to achieve achieve that drinking water.
And obviously, the best solution would be to have the algae never form in the first place.
Well, it's probably going to form, it's that you would like to select from a place in your watershed where it is not.
Yes.
I think that's really, in other words, you're going to let things grow and go through their season and things like that. But it'd be so much better if we knew when we had when water in a certain reservoir at a certain level was contaminated with algae versus when it's not.
Right. And
you
then
don't want to treat that
water
out.
Yeah, take that water.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that with Steve Itko, how we can actually draw water from different depths within the reservoir. So that makes perfect sense. You had mentioned sludge, and I do want to talk about sludge. But before we kind of talk about what you're doing with sludge, can you define sludge? It's a term that you and I and the water company and water professionals use all the time, but I'm not sure our listeners understand what we mean when we say sludge. Sounds nasty.
That's actually quite good. I mean, drinking water, drinking water is the water. But, obviously if we're going to filter water, we're going to filter something out of the water. And anything that all the dirt or the, like you said, algae or anything that you filter out of the water is going to wind up being pushed to the side, and that's going to become a wet solid, and that solid we call sludge.
Yeah, it's like mud almost. Yeah.
We call it. Well, I mean, the scientific term is wastewater residuals, but we don't want to. It's just easier to say sludge.
Yes. Yeah, and so like a plant like our Whitney plant will actually take that sludge and put it in a centrifuge, get all the water out of it, and send that water back through the treatment process. That plant is a zero discharge facility, so we actually do not discharge any liquids from that plant into the wastewater system.
Right.
So then what you're left with is sludge. This hard.
It's usually fair. There's still a significant amount of water. I mean, sludge, a solid becomes a solid. They say you're 90%, 95% water, and that's probably pretty close to the case. So by the time sludge is 5% solids and 95% water, it's mud.
Yeah, and
it's mud already.
And so, what in your research and development role? What are you doing with sludge? How are you looking at it? What's the research and development idea there?
We actually have an interesting byproduct from drinking water. In drinking water, we're actually separating out really nice topsoil. I mean, that in drinking water treatment, unlike wastewater, where wastewater is all that waste that has come down the line, and their sludge is going to be something that carries a lot of problems with it, right? Ours, on the other hand, is just good alluvial dirt for the most part, and it carries a little bit of the chemistry that helped pull it out of the water stream at the treatment process. Well, it turns out that chemistry could do some good in other places as well. And there's a lot of places in the world where, chicken farms or, there's different facilities where you produce way too much phosphorus, which is a fertilizer. It's great to have a fertilizer, but a lot of agricultural processes run off some of their fertilizer. And then it winds up in the river and it starts doing things that we don't want in the river. So we're trying to develop a soil, basically a soil amendment based on our sludge that would be an engineered soil for bioremediation. It would actually trap and contain polluting phosphorus.
Huh. And you're working on that. That's one of the things you're working on. How? I guess, can you just quickly kind of walk us through, or walk me through, like, how does something like that work? So you've identified that this could be a case use for the sludge. Like, what do you do from there? Because I'm not a scientist, and I'm just wondering, like, in my brain, what are your next steps once you've identified, hey, this may actually be a good use for this? What are the next steps in that?
Well, usually it's good to figure out whether your idea actually physically works. So the first thing to do is to go as an R&D person. Basically, I'm going to tell my boss, I'm going to say, well, this sounds like a really good idea. This is, the literature says, if we took this, we could do this. So my suggestion is, let's do an experiment. And with the sludge experiment, basically what we did is we took, meter square dirt, and we actually grew things in it, and we tested the rainwater flowing through it. So we basically went through an entire year cycle of basically using planter boxes for all intents and purposes to test whether whether the soil actually did what we thought it was going to do. And then, we let it rain, we let things grow, a bunch of, volunteer plants. We don't like to say the word weed, but volunteer plants. We allowed them to grow, and then we actually hit it with water that that was contaminated in a way that might be coming off of a chicken farm or some field that had just been over fertilized. And we actually tried and it allowed it to percolate through the plants, through the soil, and we sampled the water afterwards, and we got water that was as good as any water in any creek in Connecticut. So it worked extremely well. And the next step, of course, is to figure out what is the market, and whether we can actually go to market with that. We do talk to DEEP, the Environmental Protection Agency here in the state of Connecticut, and we say, okay, well, we believe that this product fits under our beneficial reuse of materials, and then we would go to we would sell it on the soil market.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So it's really a scientific method. You start with your hypothesis, and then you do your experiments to try and prove it out. That's so interesting. And I don't know this, and I don't know if you do, and if you could just say, do you know how much sludge generally the RWA produces in a year?
It's quite variable, and I don't think I would put that number
okay,
out.
I'm just
I don't think I would tie myself to a given
to a guess. Okay,
I'm not
that's
actually
fine.
being evasive. It really is something that comes up and goes down.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
It's a little hard to tag down. I can tell you that it's hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, so it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, we're not talking about a few cubic yards here. We're talking about a lot. One of the other things I know you're working on, and I know you're working on it because I had a very tiny part in it, is part of our lead program. So
Yes.
we've done, I want to say, 5 different radio shows on lead since I've started. And you, I know, are working on a way to identify lead service lines without having to dig a hole, right?
Yes,
Because right now,
correct.
our listeners may remember about a year and a half ago, we did something called vacuum excavation, where we went out and we dug a bunch of holes so we could actually look at the pipe and tell if it was lead or copper or something else. So can you tell us about this pilot that you're doing? I know we still don't have results, right? It's still in the
We're still
waiting
working
phase.
through the process of getting we've actually done the initial pilot to calibrate the process, but we haven't been able to get back and actually we need to dig up about 30 lines to see how well we did.
So tell us the hypothesis of this one and what you were
Okay.
testing out.
So fundamentally, we're in a position where we've done almost all the lead service lines based on our records we think we have. But obviously something could have gotten past us, and we want to be able to survey our whole system, particularly the system in the right age range, and we'd like to go back and we'd like to test every single one. But we don't want to have to go into people's houses. So we don't want to have to crawl through somebody's basement and disrupt their lives and be able to test to see that. And it doesn't really tell you if it goes what's all the way back at the street anyway, right? So we don't want to have to dig up somebody's yard. We don't have to want to dig up the street just to go down there and see if we missed one of these lead service lines. But there's nobody that wants a lead service line on the way to their house anymore. So I mean, we want to get rid of every one of them. So the question becomes, okay, well, how can I see whether I have a lead service line under the street next to the curb? Well, you have to be able to actually sense that lead service line. And when there's a company, we're working with them. They're out of Canada, and we've brought them down. And what they actually use is, I like to call it a tuning fork. And they come to, they actually drop a pole, like a little fork down on your valve, the valve that turns the water on and off to your house, and they actually vibrate it a little bit, and they get a signal. And if they get a signal, it's just like it's like a tuning fork. And if the line between you and the main line is steel, it has one, it has one pitch, and if it's lead, it has another pitch. And theoretically, we should be able to determine, just by the sound that's coming back to our equipment, whether you're one of the missed lead service lines in our system. We think it's very few, but we want 100% coverage.
Yeah, this is one of those ones when I heard about it. As you said, theoretically, it makes so much sense, right? That different metals kind of vibrate at different frequencies, and you should be able. Mm-hmm. I really. Selfish reasons, but also for the company. I really hope this one turns out to work, because I think it could make us so much more efficient with how we're identifying these lines out there.
Yeah, it's an elegant solution that prevents a lot of things that nobody wants.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that one's a pretty cool one. The last thing I want to talk about in your work is PFAS. So, if folks who listen to our show, we've talked about PFAS in the past. It's one of those things that no water company created the problem, but we're left to deal with the problem. Mm-hmm. The RWA really doesn't have much of a PFAS problem right now. If you're listening and you want to learn more about our system, we post all of our PFAS test results on our website every quarter, mm-hmm. so you can go look at that. But, because the RWA is really a leader in the water industry, we're doing research on PFAS removal, right? Because right now, the way I understand it, it's not that easy to get out of the water. It takes a lot of carbon and mm-hmm. a lot of money. Yeah. And so we're doing some experiments on PFAS removal, correct?
We definitely are, and it's the whole. I have to give I have to make sure that. Our operations people, our engineering people, our environmental people, they're all involved in looking at PFAS. And they're all involved in looking at PFAS because, as you say, they're members of the community. Right. They're a member of the water treatment community. This is a problem we all share. They call it the forever chemical. It's everywhere and in everything to a certain extent at a very small level. We, like you say, we do not have a regulated level of PFAS in any of our systems at this time. But, we could be unlucky at another point in history, and we're definitely participating in the development of technologies to treat for PFAS. Now, the problem with PFAS isn't so much, as you say, that it's hard to treat for. It's that the relevant limits are so low.
Sure, parts per trillion.
It's 4 parts per trillion, which is an unbelievably small tolerance level, and even hard to detect. As much less treat for. It actually has a really good affinity for activated carbon. Now, for people who what is activated carbon? Well, I always like to say, it's the end of a luau. It's basically generally it's coconut. The best activated carbon comes from a coconut shell that's been burnt without a lot of oxygen around it, and it makes it have a really high affinity for traces of organic chemicals. So activated carbon is a wonderful material for cleaning water, and everybody said, well, it's charcoal, and it isn't new. You go to Spain, and you go to the ruins of the aqueducts. They have large terracotta cylinders at either end of an aqueduct as it's crossing a river in Spain. Everybody goes, well, what were those for? And I said, well, that's where the charcoal went in. So it is a 2,000-year-old technology.
Yeah, they figured it out a long time ago.
So to call it a new technology is not probably accurate. But although we're learning a lot more about it, obviously, in chemistry of it. We have several research and development programs going after activated carbon right now. We're applying for some intellectual property in that area. We are actually really pursuing the ability to do that because we consider it to be a likely emerging contaminant. Someday we're going to find it in our system. It's so ubiquitous in the world that it's unlikely that we won't see it sometime. So so far better for us to safe everybody in advance and be a leader in that technology than to wait until we need it.
Absolutely. This has been so interesting, and very different than any other show I've done, just kind of talking about research and talking about NASA and all that. But it is now time for us to do my favorite segment, which is the 5 unrelated questions. These are questions that have nothing to do with NASA, nothing to do with research. They are just to get to know our guests better. So, Sherwin, do you have any pets?
Yes, I have a wonderful dog. We call it the Bolsky. It's a half British Bulldog and half Siberian Husky.
After the show, I have to see a picture.
You have to see a picture of this.
I'm trying to figure out what that dog would look like.
So I'm definitely we're a symbiotic family.
So for folks that will never see this picture, does your dog look more like a bulldog or a husky? Like,
well, it looks
face,
absolutely like a Siberian Husky, except for it has little short bulldog legs.
I cannot wait to see a picture of this dog. Next question. Who is your favorite musician or band?
Interesting. I have had the honor of working with people who have funded startups a lot in my life, and they're very interesting people. So some of my favorite people and bands have nothing to do with their music, but because they are personal relationships. And I will tell you that the bass player for Devo was finished his rock and roll career and became an architect, and then he worked on space habitats. A very interesting gentleman. Lots of fun to have a beer with and ride quads in the desert around artificial habitats. He was a wonderful person.
Is he still in the band? Because they're touring now. I wonder if he's still
not
doing
really working with them right now.
Okay.
Interesting gentleman named Frank Schubert. His second great-grandfather was Franz Schubert, which is interesting. And my other great friend in that regard was John Perry Barlow, who basically ran the Grateful Dead, and I worked for him for a year trying to get a startup together in the South Bay.
That's so interesting.
So, but in terms of music, I'm kind of a coffee house,
like singer-songwriter.
Singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar guy
Jason
from
Mraz,
Berkeley.
kinda.
So you don't know anybody I know.
Okay. So, well, here's one for you: confluence of science and rock and roll. Are you familiar with Dexter Holland? He is the lead singer of a '90s grunge metal rock group called The Offspring.
Okay.
So, are you familiar with The Offspring?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so he is a PhD microbiologist who is still tours with The Offspring, but when he's not touring with The Offspring, he's an adjunct, I think, at USC. But their first big song was Come Out and Play, but the big line from it was you got to keep them separated.
Yeah.
And you think when you listen to the song, it's about like a couple, but he actually says he wrote the song because he was in the lab one day with petri dishes, and his professor said, "Now remember, you got to keep them separated," and that's how he wrote that song.
Yeah.
So, the confluence of science and music,
was
right
it
there.
Kiss or one of the major? I think it was Kiss. Was one of the bass play? I think it was the bass player for Kiss. I could be wrong about this one, but it's one of the major bands from that era. He actually got his PhD in mathematics.
It's Queen.
Queen,
yep,
that's
Brian
correct.
May.
And did his dissertation on ring plane dynamics, which is probably the most obscure piece, a theoretical piece of mathematics you can have in your life.
Yep.
And I'm like, My God, okay, you have.
Yeah. So the same guy that wrote "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions" is a math genius.
He's a harmonics math genius.
Yep. Yeah, that's Brian May. All right, next. What is your favorite hobby? So Saturday, you have 3 hours to yourself. What are you doing?
I'm a gardener.
Gardener, okay. Like flowers or veggies? Like you
Herb gardening, medicinal and culinary.
Oh, nice.
Really. I also kind of really like to, ancient things, things that are no longer, heirloom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, try
The fruits and veggies the way they looked before science got to them.
Oftentimes the heirloom, like I say, herbs.
Yeah, nice.
Interesting.
Cookie, brownie, or ice cream? Which one are you picking?
Ice cream.
What kind?
Raspberry.
Ooh, that's my first raspberry. The raspberry's good, though. Last question. Who was your favorite teacher in school and why?
I had a tutor taught me English. I was a proud product of Oakland, California public schools, and I was not good at English. And I had a tutor, a special ed teacher, actually, who I stayed in contact with up until about 2 years ago when she passed away with Alzheimer's disease. And I tracked her all my life, and she made a big difference in my life. I think that the right teachers can make a huge difference in your life.
And she got to see your successes in life and that you became a PhD scientist.
And she was incredibly grateful when I flew out the last time, and all she could do was say, "You remembered me."
Oh, that's why I asked this question, by the way, because teachers have an impact that they don't realize they have. It's kind of similar story. Not my favorite teacher, but my high school guidance counselor, I stayed in contact with until the day she died about 1.5 years ago.
Right.
We became friends, and it's so funny. For 20 plus years after graduation, she always said, "Call me Nancy." I said, "I can't call you Nancy. You're Miss Halsey." And she wasn't even Miss Halsey anymore because she got remarried, but I still called her. I could never call her by her first name because she was Miss Halsey to me.
It's always important to remember your teachers.
Yes, they have huge impacts on our lives. So, Sherwin, thank you for joining us today. This has been another edition of Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority. One thing I would like our listeners to take away from this show is that the RWA, your water company, the little old RWA here in New Haven, Connecticut, is really at the forefront of research that will benefit not just the water company and our customers, but the entire water industry across the country. And those efforts are being led by Sherwin Gormley, our planning engineer and research and development guru. If you missed any portion of the show, go back and watch us on YouTube. Download us as a podcast on Spotify or Apple. And with that, I give to you a fond toast, raise a big glass of drinking water to stay hydrated, healthy, and stay engaged. This has been Liquid Lunch.